Всем добрый день, вы смотрите видеоканал GameScope, с вами Игорь, и мы находимся в центре Москвы, в гостинице «Националь», где в скором времени пройдет пресс-конференция с креативным директором компании Walt Disney Animation Studios и Pixar Animation Studios Джоном Лассетером, который также является автором, сценаристом и продюсером многих известнейших мультфильмов этих компаний. Он поделится своими впечатлениями о своих будущих проектах, также расскажет о своем творчестве и ответит на вопросы журналистов. Итак, смотрим.
Сценарист, режиссер, аниматор, продюсер, креативный директор Walt Disney Animation Studios и Pixar Animation Studios, создатель великой студии Pixar Джон Лассетер. Прошу приветствовать. Джон, первый вопрос. Мы знаем, что Pixar каждый год радует нас новым мультфильмом. Это происходит в конце весны или в самом начале лета. И совсем скоро уже выйдет новый мультфильм «Храброе сердцем». Я думаю, что все уже оценили его ролики рекламные, плакаты и ждут. В принципе, студия Pixar уже имеет все возможные награды и добилась всех высших почестей, которые в мире анимации существуют. Тем не менее, чувствуется, что эта работа новая, абсолютно другая. Другая по стилю, другая по языку. Не могли бы вы рассказать подробнее об этой картине, в чем ее отличие, кто ее режиссер и кому пришла в голову идея сделать средневековый мультфильм на студии Pixar?
Brave is very different for Pixar. Because it's in computer animation, it's very, very difficult to do a historical film because the computer likes to make things perfect. And most of the Pixar films have been set in contemporary time frame. Brave is our first real period film set in medieval Scotland. And I was very excited about this because I always like striving to create something new for us and challenging ourselves in this way. It's also the first female main character. And this is something that we've been wanting to do for a long time because we've had very strong female characters, but all of our main characters have been, male characters. So that's kind of a first for us as well. We're very excited about that. When we got started on Brave was 7 years ago. And at that time, I was looking around and most of all the other animation studios had been kind of veering away, kind of deciding not to do kind of traditional fantasy fairy tale like stories, which are honest ones. Unless they were making fun of it, they didn't really want to do it. They felt like the audience had moved away from the sincere fairy tale. And I felt like the world really, loves these kinds of stories. And so I was very excited when we got started developing Brave. But we didn't want to do a Disney-style fairy tale. This is very much a Pixar style. It's got a lot of action in it. It's got some really amazing characters. And some very strong emotional themes through it. But it's also very, very funny, which is those things are sort of the hallmarks of a Pixar film. One of the most important things to a Pixar film is the emotional content of the film. It's something we worked really hard on from the very beginning. It's directed by Mark Andrews, it's his first film he's directed for Pixar, but he's been intimately involved in The Incredibles, Ratatouille, in working with Brad Bird, and he is a force of nature. He has got so much energy. It's produced by Catherine Serafian, who is a Pixar veteran, who's been working with me for almost since the beginning of Pixar. And it's a fantastic creative team. At this point, we don't have any plans for a WALL-E sequel. Andrew Stanton was the director of WALL-E, and we at Pixar, when we make a sequel, it's because we have come up with an idea that's as good or better than the original, but it's different than the original. You all have seen many Hollywood sequels come into it. It seems like they're just doing the same thing all over again. And at Pixar, we never like to do that. That's why when you look at all the sequels we've made, they're very, very different from the original. And the case in point for, we're doing a sequel to Monsters Incorporated, but it's actually a prequel, because Monsters Incorporated started with Mike and Sully. The main characters were best friends. So this new movie takes place before the original, and it talks about how they became best friends. And they did it at Monsters University. So it's a university movie. It's like a college movie, and so it's very, very funny, from that standpoint. So it's very different than the original Monsters Incorporated. So, but at this point in time, we don't have any great ideas for WALL-E yet. So, when we create a 3D version of a Pixar film that we made in the past, some of the biggest challenges are the most boring. It's that the software that we created the movie on is old, right, the level. And it's like having to then take all of everything, all the files, the animation files, the model files, the shaders, the way it looks, and bring them up to current standards. And so, we can render an image and it looks identical to the old one. So that takes a tremendous amount of work by our team. And again, it's like kind of boring, but it's hard. And we call it digital archaeology. And it's actually, surprisingly, it's a very severe problem out there in the world, because so much, the world now is on, aspects of art and everything is, filmmaking is stored digitally, and then you have to worry about, it becoming out of date where you can't access those files anymore. So we're very active in keeping our archives up to date. Finding Nemo was really one of those movies that lends itself to a 3D so perfectly. I love 3D, and one of the things that is really special about, that's unique about WALL-E, is that the main characters are within the boundary of the frame all the time. And one of the things in 3D, as you're creating a 3D film, and you want something to kind of float in front of the audience, come away from the screen, if part of that object is intersecting the border of the screen, it sort of doesn't really work, as well. And so with Wall-E, with Finding Nemo, what was great is that all the characters just floating in the frame. And the other great thing is we worked really hard to make it the underwater believable in the original film, and we put a lot of particulate matter, little floating bits of things in the water to give it. And when we see that in 3D, it gives you tremendous amounts of depth. We were worried a little bit that it was just clear water and you're not going to really perceive the depth, but all that particulate matter really gives you a tremendous amount of depth. For those who saw the little clips that I showed this morning, that I purposely showed the shark sequence in the old sunken submarine, because it really has this fantastic dramatic depth to it in 3D. But the whole movie is just spectacular in 3D. And the other main thing that I love about taking our films and re-releasing them in a 3D version is really so that the audience can see it on a big screen again. It's a great opportunity, and especially here in Russia, because the growth of the number of theaters around your country has grown quite a bit. And when Finding Nemo came out, there was was not as big of a release as it is now. So it gives an opportunity for people who may have only seen Finding Nemo at home on a TV. It gives an opportunity to see it on a big screen, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about these re-releases. When you think back to the time before home video, if anybody can remember those times, but Walt Disney used to release his animated films every 7 years, because he believed that there was a new generation of children every 7 years. And so when home video came along, that kind of took that re-release strategy away. And it's nice with 3D now, we can have this new type of re-release strategy on the big screen, so new generations of children and families can see our films again on the big screen the way they're meant to be seen.
Следующий вопрос, пожалуйста.
Селезнев Игорь, интернет-СМИ GameScope. Здравствуйте, Джон. Хотелось бы лично от себя сказать вам огромное спасибо за мультфильм «Приключения Ника» «A Bug's Life». Это был один из моих любимейших мультфильмов в детстве. И у меня для вас вопрос, раз уж немного тема затронула разговор о формате 3D. Скажите, насколько перспективен, по-вашему, формат реалити 3D в анимационных студиях в сравнении с другими существующими на данный момент технологиями 3D? Спасибо.
We look at 3D as another aspect of our tools in order to help tell the stories. And creating new films, we really think about 3D from the beginning. It's important that all the story points and all of the entertainment will come through on 2D versions as well as 3D. But when you see our films in 3D, we don't do the gags that sort of come out and kind of the coming, the coming at you kind of gags, because I think it takes you out of the story. And everything that we do in our storytelling, from the story to the directing, the camera work, the animation, the editing, is there to help tell the story, keep you always engaged and waiting to see what happens next. And anything that would take you and kind of pop you out of the story, take you out and start thinking about something else, we avoid, we try not to do. And so the way we work with 3D is it more kind of takes you, puts you into the world, and it kind of engulfs you into the world. And I think it's with the new, new sound systems, with their having better and better surround systems, it kind of works with the 3D to really bring you into this world and kind of engulf you into it. But I hope that any audience member around the world that watches our films in 3D, they just get swept away with the story, and it really doesn't. It doesn't sort of take you out of the story. But I've always been very excited about 3D because our films are made in 3D. They're just, you know, within the computer. It's a truly three-dimensional world we're creating. That's why we're able to go back to the older films and do a 3D version fairly easily. We do have to do a little adjustment, but we don't want to change the original movie at all. We just want to make a 3D version. So it's because they were made in 3D. We've just been looking at our worlds with just one eye closed. You know, now we can open the other eye. There's I was very fortunate early in my career to be able to travel to different film festivals. Before we did feature films, we did short films, and so we would travel to the different film festivals all the time. And I was always there's a number of Russian animated films that were very, very special. One especially was I remember the title was called The Cow. And it was done with a paint-on-glass technique, and I don't know in Russian what the title was, but it was a very, you know.
Yeah, it's Alexander Petrov.
Yeah, Petrov. Yeah, Alexander Petrov, and it was really spectacular, really emotional. And there's other films I can't remember the titles of, but I remember because of the rich history of Russian animation. It's so artistic, and that's the thing I love. You know, when we at Pixar we strive, even though our films are, you know, kind of more Hollywood films, that still we strive to make them very artistic and beautiful. And so I've been inspired by Mr. Petrov's film The Cow, which was always like very when you look at the frame, the staging of the imagery and what he was doing was really very artistic and very beautiful, and it's a very kind of emotional story. So we always are striving to get emotion in our films too.
Я помню, когда мы с Джоном встречались несколько лет тому назад, он рассказывал о том, как когда вот команда режиссеров и продюсеров Pixar, когда у них кончается идея, они все садятся в просмотровый зал и смотрят какой-нибудь полнометражный фильм Хаяо Миядзаки. И обязательно что-нибудь там для себя новое находят. Дело в том, что Хаяо Миядзаки, в свою очередь, когда-то мне рассказывал о том, что он захотел заниматься анимацией после того, как посмотрел советский мультфильм «Снежная королева» Льва Атаманова. С этого все началось для него. Я хотел бы по этому поводу спросить его Джона, зная, что он хорошо знаком с Миядзаки, действительно ли они друзья, и как происходит творческий обмен между ними, учитывая, что у Миядзаки совершенно в другой технике снимает свое кино и не любит компьютерную анимацию, любит исключительно рисованную.
Hayao Miyazaki is a dear friend of mine. I first met him when he came over to Los Angeles in the early 1980s with a group of Japanese animators to learn as much as they could about how American animation was created. We got to know each other then. Then in 1987, I went over to visit Japan for the first time to talk at a computer graphics conference. It was in November of 1987, and I got an opportunity to visit him at his studio. And there he was in the middle of production on My Neighbor Totoro, which is one of my favorite films. It's fantastic. And so he kind of readily admitted he didn't like computer animation. And then I showed him my two short films, Luxo Jr. and Red's Dream. And it's the first time anybody had ever seen him be interested in computer animation. And he went and got an illustration and brought it back and said, "Can you do this in animation?" It was of this flying machine. I said, "Yeah, that would be perfect, you know, for the type of things we were looking at." And so I think it kind of opened the door. He still primarily loves the hand animation, the hand-drawn art and the painted backgrounds. But they have slowly integrated a lot of digital techniques at Studio Ghibli. I think some of them, without his knowledge, they just do it, you know. And but he is a remarkable artist in his storytelling, and it's very different than the way we make films. I mean, he basically sits down and storyboards the whole movie himself. And he just kind of works it from the beginning to the end, and then he'll make some adjustments, but he kind of sits and thinks about it. And our process is more of a collaborative storytelling. The ideas for our films always come from the director, but then they quickly work with a writer in our story team, which we comprise a kind of head of story and then some storyboard artists. And we'll work and rework and rework and rework the storyboards. It's a way that we are able to get the story working really well before we go into productions, before we start the animation. And so for me, looking at Miyazaki and seeing how he does it from starting from the beginning, going to the end, and maybe making a few adjustments, but primarily it's the way he draws it out, and they kind of lay out the movie based on his storyboard sketches. I'm amazed. I have such admiration for him because of how good, how emotional his stories are, what great characters they have. But also, he's probably one of the best in, I think, all film, not just animation, on the staging of action. You know, there's a movie I recommend of his called Laputa, or it's called Castle in the Sky, and it has some of the most amazing action sequences in it. It's phenomenal. And so we always get inspired by his movies, you know, because there's so much interesting imagery and ideas in his films. So I always help out also on the English language versions of his films to make sure that they kind of help protect his vision, because they're released in the United States by Disney. Oh, I see, yeah. Classic fairy tales really kind of are about kind of fantasy, about, you know, something based upon the world that we know, but then it goes way beyond that. And I've always, of course, grown up with fairy tales, both in the written word, but also in movies. And I just love the genre of kind of fantasy and fairy tale. And it really has influenced me in all the work we've done. And there's sort of a foundation at Pixar of our films, which is we like to show the audience something that on one level they're familiar with, but then we show it to them in a way that they've never seen before. So that it's, to me, there's a connection with the audience that you have to make, something that on one level they're familiar with. But then you just don't want to show them something that they've seen before. So that's where you want to bring in, you know, a room full of toys that are alive. You know, fish underwater, a little lone robot on a planet. You want to start kind of think about things that people haven't seen before. And this is where I think our inspiration from fairy tales and the fantasy kind of come from. Instead of, and like I said, Brave is our first kind of, you might say, true fairy tale. It fits in that fairy tale genre. And one of the things about fairy tales that I always strive to, that defines a fairy tale to me is also, does the story have magic in it? And I think whenever you get magic in a story, there's, for me, I'm a very logical storyteller. There's always a challenge of, does this magic make sense? Because you want to, what's very important is you create a film, you want to establish the world of your movie. And part of the world is not the way things look, but it's the rules of the world. And magic being brought into a story typically means the audience will know, okay, anything can happen at any time, so I'm not really worried about what's happening with the main character, because magic will make it all save the day. And that's where I always have a problem with just where magic is used all the time in fairy tales and stories, because I want to keep people, the audience, to be on the edge of their seat, worried about the main character, can't wait to see what happens next. And I think that, and that's why when in Brave there is magic. It's the first kind of Pixar film with real magic in it. And we worked really, really, really hard to try to get a logic to the magic, but a very strong set of rules that the magic kind of lives within. And I think it works very well in Brave, but it was actually, challenging, from a storytelling standpoint, because I think as a storyteller, it's the worst thing in the world to create for your audience to make it like, you give away your ending and everybody's like, oh, I know how it's going to end. We always like to, in our Pixar films, to really have the unexpected. At one point, sometime in our film, in each of our films, I want the audience to sit there and go, I don't know what's going to happen next. If you remember in the recent Pixar film, Toy Story 3, when Woody and Buzz Lightyear and all the toys, are in the trash dump, and they go into the furnace, and they're slipping down. We wanted to make that moment to where the audience is kind of going through all the possible ways that they can get out. And we really designed the furnace, we designed everything about that to take away all options, so that you really felt like, oh my God, I think they're going to fall into the fire. I can't see a way out, so each of our stories, but then when they get out, there's kind of a fun logic to it, which is the aliens were working the claw, which goes way back to the very first movie. And I think that in each of our films we strive to do that. And so the challenge for Brave was introducing magic, a classic fairy tale kind of thing, but still having that moment where you just felt like, how's it gonna work out? You don't know, And I think it works. It's very special, but fairy tales have always been very inspirational, partly because of the fantasy aspect of things that's based upon the world that we know, but then it's just some element is really different and changed, and we've been applying that to all of our films. You're talking about TV series you're talking about TV series on television, like a half-an-hour TV series? I just want to be clarified. Right. At Pixar, where we, story is so important to us, and I think that to do a TV series, you have to produce a tremendous amount of story. Numbers of stories. When you think about The Simpsons, or think about some of the TV series that are animated TV series in America that are very, very popular, I'm always in awe of them because of to be able to produce that many stories and keep the quality up. At Pixar, it takes 4 years for us on average to make one of our films. And it just is a tremendous amount of work. So much of the time it's spent in dealing with the stories. So at Pixar, we're really not in the business of doing TV series, but one of the things though that we do is we love to create. In our films, I believe you have to do three things really well to make a successful film that's entertaining to the audience. You tell a compelling story that's unpredictable and keeps people on the edge of their seat. You populate that story with really memorable and appealing characters, and you put those characters in that story into a believable world. Not realistic, but believable for the story that you're telling. And so when you're done with a film, it's like you've created this really beautiful and unique world, and with these really appealing characters. And so for us, it's like I always have the desire to tell more stories with those characters in that world. And really, it's for us, it's all about coming up with another story that's as good or better than the original for the sequels. But also, we've been doing some short films with the Cars characters and the Toy Story characters, doing some smaller, more fun little short cartoons, with those characters. And it's really because we love these characters so much, and the world is a place we like to go to again and again. And so these are not really TV series. We don't say, okay, we promise we're going to make 20 of these in a year, because that would be way too much for us to do. We just don't have that kind of capacity. But and keep the level of quality of what we're familiar with. But I love the fact that more and more, especially in American animated series that are made for adults, are being made, and they're very, very clever. There's some really terrific ones. I love them. So it takes like I said, it takes 4 years to make our films, and so in order to have one movie come out every year, it means you can imagine backing up, and we have to be developing the stories way in advance of that. So we have a lot in development at Pixar right now. So of course I mentioned Monsters University, which is going to be coming out next year, which is very funny. The one after that is called The Good Dinosaur. It's directed by Bob Peterson, and he was the co-writer on Finding Nemo and on Up, and he was nominated for an Academy Award for original screenplay for both of those. Also, he was the co-director on Up with Pete Docter, and he's directing this film along with co-directing with a guy named Pete Sohn, who did Partly Cloudy. It was one of our short films. It was really fun. He's very talented. And they came up with this idea that just sort of theorized that what if the meteor that killed off the dinosaurs missed Earth and dinosaurs kept living, And it's really a great story, because it's just they're very funny dinosaurs. They're kind of cartoony, but they are dinosaurs. They're not walking around with clothes on or anything like that. They still are kind of dinosaurs, but they're we focus on mostly the plant eaters, not the carnivores or herbivores, and plant eating dinosaurs, and their society becomes more of an agrarian society, meaning farmers. They become farmers, and so it's a very funny story about a certain way of life that a young dinosaur has trouble fitting into, and he ends up going on this quest in order to sort of, he kind of he kind of messes up, and he has to kind of put everything right by going on this quest. And on the quest, he meets this other character that is an outcast from his society too. And so the two of them form this bond, and it becomes this unique kind of story that it's hard. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's really a very special, very emotional story. But it's so quirky and kind of nutty. You know, and that's really the hallmark of kind of Bob Peterson and Pete Sohn's talent. They're really, Bob Peterson is truly one of the funniest people I've met, and it's coming through in this story. So it's like Pixar does dinosaurs, but like anything we touch, like we did superheroes with Incredibles, and it's unlike any other dinosaur picture you've seen, because it doesn't fit in your typical, you know, what you think dinosaurs are. It's really kind of a special thing. It's absolutely beautiful too. It's really special. Then Pete Docter, who did Up and Monsters Incorporated, is working on the next one. We don't have a title for it yet, but it takes place in the mind. And what it is that Pete has this way of constantly trying to figure out something that we're all familiar with in some way, like monsters. Like every child, you know, growing up, you always think there are monsters under your bed or in your closet, something like that. So he said, well, I want to explore that. I want to show that yes, the kids are correct, and tell the story of why monsters are in the closet. And so he's trying to find those. It's like toys being alive with Toy Story. He helped create Toy Story with me. And so he's constantly looking for these kinds of things. And so, you know, you look at people oftentimes and they do something and you go, what were they thinking? You know, or even when, you know, it's like how a song gets stuck in your head and you just can't get it out. You know, and little quirky things like this that we all deal with emotions, or certain emotions just seem to take us over, anger or happiness, or you start giggling and laughing and you can't stop, or something like that. He thought, well, you know, I want to take a look at that. I want to sort of explain that. And so his ideas were the emotions of this little girl are the characters. And it takes place kind of up in the head of this little girl and how they control things that go on. And it's very, very clever. And it's truly unlike anything you've ever seen. Yet it's weird. It's like explaining certain things that are so, it's like, that's why that happens. That's why songs get stuck in your head. And so he's been, one of the things that I believe in very strongly as we develop the stories for our films is I believe in research. I believe in doing as much research on a subject matter as you can get. You name the movie, you know, we have become amateur entomologists, you know, about bugs for A Bug's Life. You know, for Finding Nemo, I insisted that all of our leadership, you know, creative leadership of each of the departments on Finding Nemo, they all got certified to become scuba divers, and they all actually went underwater and they studied it. We talked, we're in the San Francisco area of California, and so we have the University of California, Berkeley, and Stanford University right near us. And so we access all these amazing professors, you know, that are so knowledgeable about all these different subject matters. And so what they've done is they've been going to Berkeley and talking to psychologists and people who are studying the mind and studying emotions and all like that. And it's been fascinating to learn how the mind works and how they're trying to, scientists have sort of estimate kind of how emotions drive things and how it changes stuff. And so we're trying to be as knowledgeable as we can, and we get inspired from this research and start coming up with ideas. And it's a very, very clever film, but you can kind of see how we're starting from scratch with these ideas and we're doing a tremendous amount of research. You can understand why it takes, you know, 4 years to even develop the story on these films. And then after that, we just announced that the creative team behind Toy Story 3, Lee Unkrich, who is the director, has worked with me since Toy Story. And then Darla Anderson, who's our most senior producer at Pixar. They're a great team. And they're developing a story that takes place around the vibrant holiday in Mexico called Dia de los Muertos. It's a very special holiday that takes place on November 1st. It's how families connect with members of their family. You know, they still believe they're around, and it's, even though they're dead, and they really celebrate this holiday. And it's a really, really kind of an incredibly beautiful, visually kind of holiday. And it's a very interesting learning about how in Mexico the families stay together in life, but then also once family members have died. And it's a very interesting holiday. Very kind of, it fills your heart with warmth, you know, this holiday. And most people look at it because they celebrate with these little skeleton characters that you see, these little, and everybody thinks of it as being kind of macabre, but it's not. It's actually full of life. It's very special. So they're developing the story based around that. So those are the kind of future projects that we've got in the works. Well, I actually think the opposite. I believe that all of our films have been very funny, but also very emotional. From Toy Story on, you know, we strive to get emotion in there. And I believe the emotion, when you really have an emotional connection with the characters in the film and the story, it's something that the audience remembers more. I think you want to have this kind of rich emotional connection to the characters, because that's where the kind of love for the characters in the movie, it lasts beyond the boundary of the film. You know, with a with a movie that has no kind of emotion to it, and it's just being played for laughs, I think, oh, it's funny, but it's not something that stays with you. It doesn't stay in the audience. And I think that around the world, our films have proven to be the ones that the families watch again and again and again and again. You know, more than almost any other studio, and I take pride in that they have families come up to me all the time and say thank you for your films, because they're the ones we love to watch. And I have many, many parents who tell me that, you know, they'll put one of our films on for the children, and next thing you know, they're watching it from the back of the room, then they move closer to the couch, and next thing you know, they're sitting on the couch and go, well, there goes another hour and a half, you know, because I've got engaged in the story. So I think it's one of the reasons why we do what we do. There's a balance in our films that's very important, and that is to have this heart, which is so important, and to have to be really beautiful and great characters, but also to be very, very funny. But funny, the humor comes from the personality of the characters and situations. It's not just that they're standing around saying funny lines all the time. They could be given by any character. The humor comes from the personality of the characters and this kind of unique thing. And I think that that's something we really work and strive for. And the humor just works regardless of the language that it's translated into. I mean, early on, and I didn't really think about this when I was making Toy Story. We were just worried about making the movie. And then I traveled around the world and watched it in many different languages, and I realized a lot of the jokes that we had put into the film didn't play when it was translated. And so this made me really think from the beginning, you know, from A Bug's Life on, our second film, I have realized that, you know, our films are going to be translated in many languages, sometimes up to 48 different languages. And you want to make sure that in every single language the movie plays like it did for the original, you know, the original language that we made it in. And so that's something that why we always are telling our stories visually. Major story points are never told in just dialogue. They're always has a visual component that connects to it. I believe audiences, kind of will remember that or get affected by it strongly if it's more visual. It's not just dialogue driven. And the humor is really personality-based humor. And I think that's what's really funny. They have very funny dialogue, but it really comes from the humor of the characters. And I think Brave has drama in it, but also it's extremely funny because of the characters.
К сожалению, наше время подошло к концу. Я хочу напоследок не только задать вопрос, попросить Джона прокомментировать завтрашнее мероприятие. Завтра Джон Лассетер проведет мастер-класс, ответит на вопросы студентов киношколы Cinemotion. Это все пройдет в рамках фестиваля «Черешневый лес». Завтра вечером в ГУМе будут показаны короткометражные мультфильмы, включая 2 абсолютно новых мультфильма Walt и Pixar. Хочу попросить Джона просто рассказать о том, что это будет за лекция и за рассказ, и на этом мы с вами, к сожалению, будем вынуждены с ним прощаться.
First, I'm going to be presenting a whole presentation of short films from Pixar and from Disney Animation Studios, and we're very excited about that because I love the short film, and we're continuing to make short films at Pixar. And so we have quite a few in our library, so we brought a bunch of them, and quite a few of them to be able to be shown. And so that's very exciting. And then we're meeting with a bunch of students, which I love to do. I always strive to meet with young filmmakers because when I was young, by the great Disney animators, I had an opportunity when I was in high school to meet them and talk with them, and it really affected me into what I wanted to do as a career. And so every chance I get, I love to meet with students and talk to them about what I find important. Oftentimes students get really excited about the software, the technology, and I always like to tell them it's not the technology that makes a movie great. It's what you as a filmmaker, what you do with the technology that makes the film great. So it's learning the storytelling, learning the basics of filmmaking and animation and design and color, and these things are so vitally important. And that really is independent of the medium in which you use to create a film, from live action to hand-drawn animation to computer animation. So it's one of the things I love to talk to kids about, because I know as a kid, I'm like a big kid, and I get so excited about technology too, but it's always in the service of the story, and that's what I was taught by the great Disney animators that were my teachers and mentors.
Спасибо огромное.